Welcome to the Truth for Your 20s podcast. My name is Katie. I'm a proud girl mom. I've been married 20 years and counting. I'm a keynote speaker to sororities nationwide and a passion to be who I needed when I was younger.
And I'm Shayna Webb, proud big sister of 5 girls, Chattanooga content creator, high school coach, and your resident 20-something co-host who definitely doesn't have it all figured out yet, but loves talking about it anyway.
And together, we are here to bring a little truth, encouragement, real stories, and laughter to your 20s.
Woo!
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Katie.
And I'm Shayna, and we're so excited you guys are here tuning in with us every Tuesday on Truth for Your 20s. And let us just say we are so grateful for you guys.
Very grateful. And today's episode is kind of born out of a mistake, but in a good way. Sorry. We recorded an episode just about myths in your 20s and stuff. And we said some really good stuff about should you play the field or not. And blessed assurance, it got cut off. We had some technical issues and about 2 minutes of us saying I thought it was pretty good stuff, but it was and I know that you would have loved to listen to that, but we had to cut it out. But honestly, I was like, you know what? We could do a whole episode about this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this is one of the biggest questions that girls in their 20s ask is like, do I need to date around to find my person? Or boys. We don't discriminate. Mainly our listeners are girls in their 20s.
Right. And I have a daughter in high school, and it's so funny because when I was on the way to come record this with Shayna, she was like, talk about people playing the field or not, because everyone thinks they have to have 100 boyfriends in high school, and it's just ridiculous. And I'm like, girl, that's
Right.
yes.
So if you're wondering, am I naive if I don't date around, or am I behind if I haven't dated much, then this episode is for you. And also let us please be clear that if you have played the field or whatever, we'll talk about what playing the field is, what we mean when we say that in a second. But if you have dated a lot of people, like that's totally like, we're not shaming at all. We never, ever, ever judge anybody. Honestly, I probably played the field a little too much too. So I'll speak to my case there. And I will say, if you have done that, something you can rest assured in is like every time you date somebody, I think you learn something and you grow from it. And what I always tell my sisters is, anytime you're in a relationship and it always ends in either a breakup or you get married. So there's, if you didn't marry the person, then you've obviously gone through the breakups. If you can look back at that relationship and see something that you learned from it or you grew from, that's great. And that is what it's for. So hopefully you can find goodness in that. And that's one reason I always like to remind my sisters and just talk about that. If you can look back at it and not say you regretted anything as far as going too far or like boundaries that you really wish you wouldn't have crossed. And we've had the boundaries podcast before, so we're not talking about that again here. But anyway, I will say, if you have dated around, I always like to say you can learn something from every person that you've dated. But as far as all the people who haven't had a million boyfriends or they've maybe only dated one person or they haven't dated at all and they're 20 years old or they're 23 years old. I have had friends who didn't date at all until after college, but you feel so behind because the whole world is like, you have to kiss all the frogs in the sea.
Yes, which is not good advice. 1,000%. Yes, we are the podcast of all of the grace. And so if you've been here for more than a minute, you know that we are definitely like a grace-filled, all of these conversations. But obviously the whole point too is just to be who we needed when we were younger and learning the things we learned the hard way or, I did a lot of studies on this stuff. And so we want to talk about just people, yes, and the world tells you, and even if they don't tell you this, there's a really feeling of FOMO when, people around you or roommates or friends or whatever have a lot of dating experience, whatever that is. And you feel like, well, maybe I'm missing something, or maybe I need to play the field, have a lot of boyfriends. And that's how I know when that's just part of the life or whatever story you're telling yourself. And we're here to bump some myths.
Yeah. Culture definitely says, how will you know what you like if you don't date around, or don't marry the first guy you date because you need experience or things like that. And then it just makes you think, why does our culture treat all these relationships like trial runs? Like you have to test all the cars before you drive them because guess what? Humans are not cars.
Exactly. And who wants to be someone's test drive? Like, do you want to be like, oh, don't worry, I'm just your warm up or your rebound? No one wants to be that. And so I think to go into dating with like, I'm just figuring life out, I'm figuring if you're what I want or not. Like those are all just very unhealthy ways to look at another valued human being. And so I think that just kind of go back to the beginning of how do I find out what I want if I don't date around? Well, you prioritize what you want. You get a list. You talk to people. You can learn by observing. You can look at toxic relationships around you. You can look at, I hope you have healthy relationships around you as well, and say, what matters to me? What do I value? And you don't have to have a lot of baggage and breakup and trauma to answer that question.
Yeah, I think what people think dating around gives you is like you are able to compare between two different people of like, did I like this or did I like this? You're able to get more confident because you can say that you've been on dates before and you understand how kissing works and all of that. You can learn red flags because you've been in you've seen the red flags in your past relationships, or you can get exposure to different personalities because how will I know if I like a blonde or a brunette better if I haven't dated both, or you're avoiding settling? All of those things is, for example, out of all those things I just listed, is comparison, so you can compare the blonde versus the brown, like whatever. Is that actually clarity, or does it just create chronic dissatisfaction because you're trying to compare everybody?
That is so real, and also just made a million times more complicated because of dating on websites, because you can just swipe and there's
Mhm.
always going to be someone better. And there's always, like,
And it's all low commitment dynamics. And
yes.
it's
And
so easy and casual.
yes. And I don't hate, I mean, I think there's definitely people who have met amazing people on social media, on dating websites. I'm not saying they're the devil, but they have not helped what we're talking about here with this whole low commitment swiping, always trying to look to find someone better. And so what you were just saying, like the lie of you need to date a lot of people to know what I like, you're just adding more comparison. And we talked about this in that garden episode, that in the very beginning, Adam and Eve, like there was no one to compare to. You were the only man in the world for me. I'm the only woman in the world for you. And now, of course, we have more comparison, but we crave that. We crave, think of all the romantic movies and romantic songs, like you are the only person for me. And we crave that. And we don't get closer to that by having more comparison. And we get that by saying, like, you are my person. Like, you are my person. And again, you don't destroy that if you have other, dating relationships or whatever, but it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. And so
Right.
getting just your definition of this is my person, you're my person, it just helps by having less comparison. And so I'll say real quick, this is something that I say when I go to colleges, and it always gets you can see the girls think. And so this is, no one in the history of ever has wanted their boyfriend to be like, hey babe, I'm an expert on hundreds of women on this campus. Like, congratulations. Or even worse, like I'm a sex expert, like I'm a dating expert. Like I'm an expert. I've dated so many people. I have so much experience. Look at me. I'm an expert on hundreds of other women. Like, congratulations. No, you want your husband, your boyfriend, whatever, to be an expert on you. And that is what we crave, that I am your definition of beauty. I'm your definition of a good relationship. And so just back to the point of, you do not have to play the field to find your forever person. In fact, it just kind of complicates things, to be honest.
Right. Instead of asking how many people should I date before I settle down or before I decide to get married, honestly, you should ask what makes somebody wise in relationships. And really what that is self-awareness. I
Yeah.
always say you're never going to find what you're looking for if you don't even know what you're looking for.
Right.
You have to have, I guess you don't have to have a written down list, but I would highly recommend like listing things that you don't want to, what's the word?
on.
Compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Compromise on. So self-awareness is definitely one of them. Emotional maturity is one of them too. So I know that your daughter's in high school, and if there are high schoolers listening to this, that's fine. And I'm glad that you're listening and everything. But as you get older, this podcast obviously is for people in their 20s. I do think you learn a lot more. And
Sure.
so emotional maturity, and I'm not saying you can't marry your high school sweetheart. Obviously, I have friends who are high school sweethearts and they're getting married this year, but they also did, they got to grow up together, which was great. But I will say, once you have, you're a little bit older, I do think there's some emotional maturity. So I'm not trying to say you can't marry your high school sweetheart, but emotional maturity is a factor as far as you don't need to date a bunch of people in your 20s because you're already emotional. You should already kind of know what you want. Even if you aren't 100% what your calling is or what your career is going to be, you still understand what you need as far as a relationship goes by the time you're in your 20s, because you've had friendships and you've had family relationships and things like that. So that's one piece of that. And also, I think another thing that makes someone wise in relationships is boundaries, which we have previous episodes on, so you can listen to that. And then community input, like listening to your friends and listening to your parents and your trusted mentors on what they think is right about a person. So you don't need to date 5 different guys for your family to know which one was the best.
Right.
I think your dad and your mom can tell if the guy is good or not, or your friends can tell who've hung out with them, and so ask your friends what they think of your person.
Yes, that's
Uh,
all good advice. And the thing I would say is movies are not a place to look for good advice.
mhm.
I love a good rom-com just like the rest of us, but we got to remember that never once in the history of ever has a boardroom gotten together and be like, let's create a script to help 20-somethings have good dating advice. Let's look at the research and say, what makes healthy couples last the test of time, and we'll make a story around it. No, they are looking to make money. They're looking to do a story that pulls at our heartstrings that you will buy and get the t-shirt and tell your friends about it. It's a money-making business. It's not there to give you good life advice. Rom-coms are great, not saying, but remember they're out there to make money, not to give you good dating advice.
Yeah,
So
so you
take that
don't
with a grain of salt, right?
you don't need to get your community input there. I would much rather ask maybe someone that has known you for years or has seen you through different seasons, because I will say time is a factor when you're dating in your 20s, because I think some people, they'll get worried that they're running out of time to have kids or whatever. And, you still want to like have a couple years before you have kids or whatever. So sometimes you're going against time. So if you are maybe dating later in your 20s, and I don't think anyone needs to date for a certain amount of years, there's no set number. It really just depends on yourself and going through different seasons and how, like, if you've seen this person in conflict versus seeing them in grief versus seeing them in, when they have a struggle going on, things like that can definitely be a good thing. I think you should see in someone before you get married. But as far as time goes, like, talk to the community around you that has known you for longer, and maybe, his family too, or his friends too, and see, the people that have known him longer than you've known him.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And another thing that just when it comes to research and stuff that might kind of help you digest all of this stuff and do you really have to play the field and yada, 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 is there was a study called, they kind of broke down two different types of marriages, capstone versus cornerstone marriage. And cornerstone marriage is kind of like you're getting married young and dumb and broke, what most of our grandparents did really. And they grew up together and learned how to do family chore, just kind of, this is the way we unload the dishwasher. This is what time we eat dinner, yada, yada, yada. Versus capstone marriage is typically getting married later in life when, a lot of those habits have been formed. And if this is tricky, because I do not want you to hear, oh, well, I have to do one or the other. But I will say that the studies show that the cornerstone, getting married young, dumb, and broke, has a lot better odds because of those factors that you're kind of growing up together and learning how to do life together. And, these things just kind of become part of your family. But I don't want you to hear that you need to hurry and get married, because that's the worst thing.
Hmm.
Because it's much better to get married at 85 with healthy decisions, knowing what you want, healthy, emotional maturity, all that kind of stuff, versus, oh, I have to have a cornerstone marriage. But I just want you to hear all of that, because the culture is saying,
You got to date all these other people
yeah,
before you can get married.
right.
Oh, yes. I mean, I know. I got married at 22, and I
Yeah.
had people saying, like, are you sure you want to get married at 22? You haven't
Yes.
even experienced anybody else since you've been 21. Like, how do you, like, don't you want to, like, go out to bars and, like, meet other
No, you
people? And I'm
don't. You
like,
found a great guy.
Cameron checks all of my major
Yeah.
boxes.
Why wait?
Yeah.
And then I think that you get to more time to build a life together and
Yeah.
more time to make memories together. And, you really are deciding, it's little things, but like now you'll have your baby mailbox dog.
Yeah.
And that's things you don't realize. Like, the time we eat dinner, the time like Brian does more laundry and I do more cooking, like little things like that we don't really have a set down discussion about, but we
Mhm.
kind of work into life. And that's just more time to get all those things figured out.
Both Cameron and I, so we got married right after I graduated college. So when I graduated college, it's like I didn't know how to live by myself really yet. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like I established all of these really like set schedules, like you were saying, like I'm cooking at this time, I'm
Right.
doing all this laundry. Cameron and I learned it together because we got married right after college. And all again, that to say, we're not, if you didn't get married after college or, you're 27, you're listening to this and you're still single, like none of that is saying you're behind, because you're
Yes.
not. We're just trying to say you don't have to date a bunch of other people because you need to figure out what you want from a bunch of other people,
Yeah. And culture just does these huge swings from one direction or the other, right? Like, my grandparents got married when they were, I think, 18 and 20,
Mhm.
young. And that was so common. And then the culture was like, no, wait till your 30s and explore the world and date everyone. And that's an extreme too that isn't really these are the extremes, and
Yeah.
neither one of them are necessarily right. And so we're kind of just helping you look at all of these different sides and to help you decide and help you to make the best decisions for what's best for you.
Yeah. Because we're also not promoting getting married to your 18, like at 18.
Yeah, and we're not,
Emotional maturity was one of the things that we said builds discernment. So,
yes. And so again, just trying to be big sisters on the internet,
yeah.
cool aunts, adopted moms, whatever you want to call it.
We're just saying you can build discernment without dating 10 people. You
Exactly.
honestly don't even need to date. I mean, yeah.
So when I get the opportunity to go to speak to colleges, and I still remember, if any of my FSU friends are listening, this is for you. I was spoke at FSU, and we were sitting all together in a car. There was like 4 of us in a car, myself and like 3 college students, and having this discussion. And there was one sweet girl who's I think like a college sophomore or junior, and she'd never had a boyfriend. And I feel behind. I'm missing out all of these things that she was feeling. And another girl who, she won't mind me telling, like, she just had a very, like, date a bunch of people. And she was telling, like, almost begging her, like, no, you are not missing anything. Like, I wish I wouldn't have all this baggage and all these, trauma. And I have another friend who got married. The guy she dated before her husband cheated on her. And she's married to a great guy, but she says that, like, I wish had I not dated him, I would never even think that my husband would cheat on me. But now that seed has been planted because of the toxic
Past
relationships. But anyway, back to the FSU people. That sweet girl who had never dated anyone ended up, after graduation, reconnecting with the guy she went to high school, and they got married. And it
Aw.
was after graduation, but it was such a cute little story. That was the only time she fell in love, her only boyfriend. And they're just so adorable. And like, that is okay too. So just letting you know, there's lots of different definitions to this.
Right. I think what your friend was feeling is that underlying fear of like, what if I don't know what else is out there? What if I
Yeah.
commit and regret it because I never experienced anything else? Or what if I'm inexperienced? And you just have to remember, it's not about, when it comes to getting married, it's not about who was the most fun. It's about security. And if you're secure in your values and confident in your own discernment, you don't need volume from multiple
Right.
people to feel that safety.
Yes, yes. And have fun too, obviously. We're just
Mhm.
saying that you don't have to have 1,000 boyfriends to. And at what point do you say, okay, check, I've dated 10 guys or whatever, you know what I
The
mean?
11th one is going to be your husband.
Right?
There's no formula.
Right. And if there was, we would know it by now. So I think that we're just kind of letting you know what the culture is not saying, that you can create a beautiful life without having a lot of
Yeah. Can you
dating.
imagine if it was like a rule? It was like the 8th person you date
Right.
is your husband. And like you just go out and you're like, that you're number 6. Sorry.
But honestly, unfortunately, people date like that. Like, I mean, I'm just, you're kind of cute on Hinge, so we'll go for a date and I'm going to ghost you.
Right.
Like, it's just.
Right. And do hear us. Obviously, and if it hasn't been clear, let us say like dating around, like if you've had multiple boyfriends or whatever, experience isn't evil and dating around is not sinful. We're just saying, date intentionally and
Yeah.
that's safe. And you don't need a large roster in order to find a perfect person.
Yes. And let's also define like dating versus relationship. So I think, yes, you should get to know people. Yes, go on dates, but when it comes to getting emotional ties and getting
Mhm.
wrapped up, and don't get me started on situationships, definitely physical intimacy is a whole bunch of other ties, that soul
Mhm.
ties, like don't go there, because that's very hurtful when that breaks up. I would say you're dating for marriage or you're dating for heartbreak. So yeah, choose
Yeah,
wisely.
you are.
Yeah.
You are. So yeah, I mean, do you have any advice maybe that you would give yourself? But say you've never, I don't know, maybe give yourself, your 20-year-old self some advice.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said it before, but just don't date dirtbags. And I know that's hard to discern when you're in your 20s, but I think that I went into dating without any plan or discernment. All the things that we've talked about on this episode, the only box they had to check was to be cute. And that's just such a superficial and unhealthy way to date. And another kind of pet peeve is mine is when I hear girls say, oh, well, we're just having fun. We're not really dating, we're just having fun. Like,
Mhm.
well, what does that mean? And when does the line break? And when do emotions get involved? And your friends and their friends are getting tied up, and maybe you start smooching, and like, then that becomes very complicated. And men, generally speaking, are the gatekeepers for relationships. And so like a lot of times he won't maybe don't want to define your relationship. And that's when you have to stand up and like, where are we? Like, what's happening? And if, that's not clear, then that might be a red flag to be like, okay, he's just kind of stringing me along. Or, this is something that you need to just stand up and say what matters to you before you get into a dating relationship. So lots to unpack here, but I think that you just need to be clear that you are so worthy of being treasured and valued. And if someone that you are in a relationship with does not see that, um, it's time to move on.
Yeah. And it's hard because, that's not what culture says
Right.
is, the having the boundaries talk. But,
Yeah.
and you think that I've had someone, because Cameron and I had the boundaries talk, and I said that to one of my friends, and she was like, people still do that? And I was like, people do still
Yeah.
do that. But it also has to come from your own confidence of you saying early on, while you guys are not sure if you like the other one likes the other one all the way, and you're both trying to impress each other hard, you have to not compromise on your values there. You have to be clear and, never allude to something that saying you're going to do something that you're not. If you
Yeah.
want to have the boundaries talk, then you need to present yourself from that way from the get-go, I think.
And it's so weird that people are afraid to be emotionally vulnerable, but not as afraid to be physically vulnerable. Like you're not going to have a boundaries talk, but you are going to, compromise your boundaries. Like think it through, like, so I highly recommend, who cares if no one does, let's say no one is having a boundaries talk. Well, you are someone and, you can decide what matters to you. So you are the person who decides what matters and have these conversations.
Yeah.
And you know what? If a guy is like, "Well, okay, that's weird," you don't need 1,000 options like we just talked about. You need one
Right.
amazing option. So
Right.
if that helps narrow the dating pool, you're welcome.
And if you're dating somebody now that you feel you already know you're not going to marry them, you're just dating them for experience, then maybe this is taking this as your sign.
Yes, because that's just toying with emotions and it's toying with their emotions. It's just not good for either one of you. So don't do that.
You don't need a certain amount of experience to find your person.
Preach, man. Did we just play that episode?
Hopefully, you guys will have to let us know what you think because obviously we love hearing from you guys. And we, again, as we like to mention, we like to be the big sister that we never had. And so obviously talk to your people too that you trust and your mentors and your people who have lived longer than you when it comes to dating and everything, because obviously each situation is different. So there's not one size fits all for everybody. But if this helped you in any way, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you through a review or an Instagram message at Truth for Your 20s. It's 20S. But
Yes.
yeah.
And share the episode on your Instagram. Give us a tag and we will make sure we thank you for that. So that means a lot. It helps it go a long way. So we appreciate that.
Yes, we love you guys. We'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.